4 words. All of the Bible hangs on 4 words. The Bible can seem to be, well, complicated. Some elements found in Scripture have been the topics of heated debates, denominational splits, and even wars. Obviously, the Bible can be complex and challenging. It can push you, stretch you, and mold you into a new man, a new woman. It is unapologetically honest, but it is doused in love. Here at Aviator, we are transitioning into a new season of ministry. As we do this, we are going to focus in on a new mission, a new vision, and a new process. That process hangs on, you guessed it, 4 words. As we come together as a church to study God's Word, we will of course deal with those topics that are tough to understand, but we will also know that the core of Scripture is a very simple command that we are to live out. It's 4 words. It's simple, it's clear, and it's what we at Aviator are about. Love God, love others. 4 words.
Well, there you go. 4 words, guys. 4 words. How many of you were here the first time we did that series? Anybody? Handful of you. So we actually did this series before, the LGLO series. We did it starting in August of 2019. That was before COVID ever came. That was before. So it was my second actual sermon series here as the lead pastor. We did the LGLO series. So by a show of hands, then, how many people of you? That's a good way to talk. How many of you guys were not here yet by August 2019? Show of hands. So a bunch of new people. Good. So some of you may be thinking, well, Dave, we've already heard the sermon series before. You're just rehashing and redoing stuff. And yeah, actually, that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to re-preach the entire LGLO series. By the way, can I get everyone to say LGLO? Can I get everyone to say it like they're excited? LGLO! Children, where are you at? Can I get a LGLO? There we go. LGLO! I'm coloring, leave me alone, all right? LGLO, it's love God, love others. And yes, we're going to do an entire series that we've already done. And let me tell you something. In another 2.5 years, we're going to do it again. And in another 2.5 years, we're going to do it again. Every so often, we're going to come back and we're going to redo this series because this is the core of who Aviator is. We talked about it being our mission, our vision, and our process. And so when you talk about like an organization, anyone else ever had to do like the assignments in school where it's like you have to make a mission statement and a vision statement and whatever, and you're like, I don't understand the difference between these. Here you go. You ready? The mission statement is what we do right now. What's the thing that like we are committed to doing? And at Aviator Church, our mission is we are committed to... Oh my gosh. Oh, Lord, give me strength. At Aviator Church, we are committed to... That is our mission. That's our mission. That's what we should be doing every day. Our vision statement is where we should be going in 10 years. And in 10 years, really, what is it that we should be doing really, really well? We should? Love God. And you may be sitting there thinking, well, Dave, if that's the mission and the vision, then what's the process? How are we going to get there? How are we going in 10 years to be so good at this? Well, what we're going to do is every single day between now and then, we're going to... Man, you guys could not sound less excited. Is it just that we haven't been around each other in a while? Is that it? Like you're feeling like jilted because I've been gone for 2 weeks? Is that the thing? So a couple of weeks ago, I was actually teaching at a youth event in Salina. And coming back Sunday, I was all hyped up. We had 7 kids profess faith for the first time in Jesus, which was awesome to get there, to be a part of, to watch God do what God does. And then Sunday night, I came home on this spiritual high. And by about 8 o'clock, my whole body hurt. I'm like, uh-oh. All right. And so I took a COVID test on Monday when I was not able to move. Like I had about a day and a half where it's like, I feel miserable. It must be the flu or something because I took a COVID test and I was negative. And so then my wife, about 2 days later, starts getting body aches and chills. And I'm like, uh-oh. And she took a COVID test, and it was positive. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Maybe I should take another COVID test. And I did. And then I was positive. And so I was planning on being back here in person last week, but I got to be out sick instead. This is a good opportunity for me to give you a reminder of our COVID policy. If you have COVID, don't come to church. okay? And so since we have told you guys that repeatedly, it felt really disingenuous for me to show up and preach last week in the room if I was COVID positive. So we took the week off. And then this week, can I tell you a thing that happened yesterday? I almost wasn't here again today because my wife and I drove our 4 children 20 hours to Virginia, which was harrowing and exhausting and all the things, all of the verbs you could think of taking 4 small children 20 hours in a van. It was fun. But anyways, we went out there for my wife's grandmother's funeral, which was on Saturday at 1 o'clock. And I had to be back here Sunday to preach. And so we tore off after the funeral to the airport. And I had a flight from Washington to Atlanta and then a connection there in Atlanta to Wichita. And I had an hour and 30-minute layover in Atlanta. And then I got to the Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. and was notified that our flight was delayed by 3 hours. I'm like, oh, no. Turns out they ended up getting a charter flight that took off way late. I got to the airport in Atlanta, and I had about 13 minutes to get off my plane to get 2 terminals over and to get on to the next plane. And I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but cardio ain't my thing, right? And I'm sitting there like hustling through the airport. It's me and 3 others from this flight running. And I came in first for what it's worth. So there you go. But anyways, man, we got there and like literally it was one of those where it's like we're walking on and you can tell everyone else was like annoyed at us coming in. And also for the poor guy who had the seat by himself on the 2-seat side of the plane. And then I walked up, I'm like, sorry, I'm there. And like the look of disappointment on his face was palpable. Anyways, I made it. I'm so glad to be here. I've missed all of your beautiful faces and also the rest of your faces. But so glad to get back. You guys, some of you just caught that. Like, hey, that's mean. Anyways, I've missed you guys so much. I'm so glad to be back so that we can walk through LGLO together. So what we're going to do with the kids here, by the way, in case you haven't picked up on this, one last announcement. Every month where there's a 5th Sunday, you're going to notice a different congregation in the room. We have decided here at Aviator that, children's church is great, and I love our children's ministry volunteers and Nikki, who works like crazy back there to make kids' church happen. But we also don't want our kids to be completely disconnected. One of the things that happened to me, boys and girls, if you're listening, you can hear this. When I was a kid, I felt like when I went to church, I was going to my mom and my dad's church. And that's just, mom and dad took me to church. Did I have an option not to go to church? No, I did not. And so therefore I went because they dragged me there. And I had to put on nice clothes, which is why most times I preach in a hoodie now. It's my formal protest for my childhood upbringing, having to put on a tie every so often. It was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But anyways, I always felt like church was like my parents' thing, and I just was a part there because my parents made me be there. We want to make sure that our kids understand that this is their church. This is not mom and dad's church. And so we actually worked our schedule around so the kids were in here for this particular week so they could hear what our church is all about. That we are here to... By the end of this day, you're going to say it like you don't hate it. You know that? It's going to be like, you're going to be like, oh, we got to love God. We should be joyful about that. But anyways, yes, we want our kids to hear what it is that we're doing. So today we're going to walk through loving God, loving others, and I'm going to do a reintroduction to a re-series that I'm re-preaching. Okay? So if you really love what you hear today, you can actually go back on our podcast feed to August 29th of 2019. You can listen to it a different way. It's literally the same thing. And I know sometimes you sit there when I give an illustration or tell a story and you're like, I've heard this one before. I know it. I can see that look on your face. Like, oh, I've heard this story before. He said this before. I'm telling you up front, you've heard the whole thing before if you've been here long enough, okay? So let's get that out right now. But it's that important that we need to understand what we're doing as a church. So, love God, love others. Why LGLO? We're going to jump into a passage of scripture in Matthew chapter 22, and we're going to look at why LGLO is the thing that we're about. Why is it love God and love others? And we're going to jump right into verse 34. It says this, but when the Pharisees heard... Okay, real quick, let's actually introduce the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They are 2 groups of people who battled with Jesus on all sorts of things, from theological issues to governmental issues. They are both bad. I've done this before as well, but since we're just rehashing everything anyways, anybody remember the song, I don't want to be a Pharisee? Anyone? I don't want to be a Pharisee, 'cause they're not fair. You see, I don't want to be a Pharisee. I just want to be a sheep. Ba, ba, ba. Anyways, There's another one that's I don't want to be a Sadducee because they're so sad, you see. I don't want to be a Sadducee. So anyways, the Sadducees had just taken an opportunity prior to these verses to challenge Jesus on his teaching and on the resurrection, which they didn't believe in. And Jesus, not surprisingly, knowing more than them, shut them down. And so the Pharisees watched Jesus go after the Sadducees, and the Pharisees and Sadducees don't like each other either. Basically, the Pharisees and the Sadducees don't like really anything, right? But anyways, they don't like each other. So the Pharisees watched Jesus put the Sadducees in their place, like, ha! But now we have to show that we're the predominant thinkers. We're going to put Jesus in his place. If you're not familiar with the Bible, that never goes well. All the times I'm going to tell Jesus what's up. It just never goes well. So here they try. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, and by this point they were so sad, you see, they gathered together. And one of them, a lawyer, everyone say, boo. Hopefully we don't have any lawyers in the house, right? But a lawyer, this is the trained, this is the legal expert, this is a scholar. The Pharisees, they all get together like, we just watched Jesus totally own the Sadducees, as the kids would say. Ponage, right? Anyways, legit, that's a thing. Older people don't worry about it. It's like a gaming thing, I've heard. Anyways, but legitimately, they've watched the Sadducees get totally shut up, and now the Pharisees like, now it's our turn. We're taking Jesus down. And they get the brightest and the smartest. There was a lawyer. He was a man who'd studied the law. And when we're talking about the law, we're talking about the Old Testament here, right? All of the laws that exist. And this is the question that he comes up with to trick Jesus. He says, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Of all of the things in the law, in the Bible, of all the rules that we're supposed to follow, what is the single most important one? Now, that question itself betrays or portrays our first point, and that is this. There are rules and there are rules. You understand? There are rules, there are things you follow, things you're supposed to do, and then there are rules. Parents who have raised children, do you have rules and rules in your house? My kid is supposed to make his bed every morning. That's a rule, all right? And if he doesn't do it, we may make him go in and make it. It is what it is. That's a rule in our house. If you lie to me, I will end you, right? So if you say, when you come out and I say, did you make your bed? And you say yes, and then I go in and see that your bed is not made, right? You broke a rule. You defied my rule. You understand? Like, it is the end of the world for my kids. If I catch you lying to me, that's the end of it. Because we have to be able to have some trust in order to have a conversation. You can screw up. You can make mistakes. You can overlook something that you should have done. All of those are acceptable. I've done those myself. You do not lie to me. There are rules and there are rules. And this lawyer is really stepping up to Jesus and he's saying, what's the rule? What's the big one? What's the most important one? And you can actually see the trap being set. What if Jesus says, you know what? Most important rule in the entire Old Testament, don't murder people. That seems like a big one, right? How many of you would agree that's an important rule? Show of hands. Good. Not enough, but good. A little concerned about the lack of hands in the room on that particular question. But no. Don't murder people. That's a good rule. That's an important rule. But if Jesus says the most important rule is don't murder people, then so it's okay to lie? Oh, so it's okay to commit adultery? Oh, it's okay to do all this other stuff? Like if you say no matter what Jesus says, he's trying to set this trap where they can then argue something else and make Jesus look foolish. And I got a thing, that's just not going to work. This week when we were in Washington, D.C., I actually learned a lot about rules because they've got some rules in Washington, D.C. And all you have to do is walk around and you will hear about the rules. I will say this, and this is not a political statement in any way, shape, or form. I live in Rose Hill, Kansas, and I drive here to Derby, Kansas for my job. And can I tell you something? And I'm just going to be straight up honest with you here. Judge me if you must. We can still be friends and disagree on this. I haven't worn a mask in like a year. You know what I'm talking about? Like a mask for COVID, right? Nobody's wearing them in the stores. I work here in a building by myself all week, and I live in my house where my children homeschool. Masking is just not a thing that we frequently do. Man, when you were in D.C., oh my gosh, they got rules on masks. And like, if you brought it down, somebody'd say, hey, pull your mask up. Like they were adamant about it. You know, another rule that they have in Washington, D.C. is don't defile any of the monuments, right? You got the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, all these things. There's this great big reflecting pool between, if you've never been there. You have the Lincoln and then the Washington and this gorgeous pool, and it's called the reflecting pool for a couple reasons. Number one is if you stand at the Lincoln Memorial and you look at the Washington Monument, it reflects the Washington Monument perfectly, and it's beautiful. It's also called a reflecting pool because it's maybe a place where you can sit on one of the many benches and just reflect on the nation's history and being surrounded by these great men who did these great things and really thinking about what that means. So it's a place to reflect. And it was frozen over, and I was there with 4 children. And the question that I got asked immediately is, Dad, can we go out onto the ice? And I said, of course, no, because there are rules. Did you know that that's a felony? Did you know that? That's a felony charge to go out onto the ice. To wade into the pool is an actual felony. My 8-year-old could be put away for like up to 3 years and have a $10,000 fine. He ain't got that kind of money, and he's not getting it from me. I can promise you that. So they wanted to go out on the ice. I told them no. Well, then we start walking down the reflecting pool, and as we get about halfway down, we see this lady come up with a bag, a big old bag. And she puts her bag down and she pulls out, we can't see it first, but what is ice skates? She's putting ice skates on. As we get closer, sure enough, this lady takes her phone, puts it on a tripod on the ice, on the reflecting pool, for which this is a felony, you understand? And she starts doing figure skating on the ice. It's beautiful. She's really good, right? And then she would always come and pose at her camera or whatever. And so as we walked by, I asked her, it's like, so are you posting that somewhere? And she's like, yeah, I put it on Instagram. I was like, oh, what's your handle? We'll follow you, right? My wife has Instagram. Because we wanted to see, as we were walking up the sidewalk, did we make it into the background of this video? Right. And so anyways, we get her handle, and then we start talking to her. Turns out she's a lady from Israel, had brain surgery, and she loves skating. It's the thing she does the most in this world. And so she talked about the fact that she's done this several times, and they've kicked her off of the reflecting pool many times for skating on there. She's like, they've never charged me yet, so I'm just going to keep doing it, whatever. And I'm like, oh. And inside, my wife and I are 2 different people. I'm hearing that. I'm like, no. That's a rule. You follow rules. You don't break rules. But my wife is this free spirit. So my kids look at my wife after they've already asked me, and they said, Mom, can we get on the ice too? Because now they have somebody else who's doing it, a bad example, leading my children astray. And I interrupted before my wife could answer. I said, no, we're not getting on the ice, you little heathens. That's breaking the rules. Well, at this point in time, Boaz gets out of the stroller and starts running the other direction. And so I run down after him. I get him, and I bring him back. And by the time I get back to my family, this is what I see. My children, allowed by my wife to get out there and just violate the law. Little felons. You're laughing like this is cute. They're felons. You understand? They're violating the law. But see, the reality is this. I look at that and I say, in this situation, there was Capitol Police everywhere. Not Capitol Police, but DC Police. I don't want to get arrested for a stupid thing like this. But some people think some rules are more important than others. And so that's the question that Jesus has asked. What is the most important rules? What are the rules and what are the rules? And here's Jesus' answer, verse 37. It says, he said to him, most important commandment in the Bible, you shall love the Lord your God with all your, and with all your, and with all your. This is the great and first commandment. You want to know what the most important commandment is? You should love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. Now, what this is really saying in a nutshell is you should love God with every single thing that you have. With everything that you have to give him, with your heart, with the way that you feel, with your mind, the way you think, with your soul, the very fiber of your being. You should be committing time to falling in love with God, and you should be giving him everything you have, which makes sense. It's a relationship. How many of you married people are cool if your spouse loves you with 47% of his heart? How many of you are striving for 60% of their mind? Boy, oh boy, if he would just give me, 20 to 33% of their soul, that'd be dope, right? We're soulmates, 20% soulmates, right? Boy, I hope that they just give me just a little bit. It doesn't work that way. You would not be okay with that. As a matter of fact, my wife and I, this is something that happens in our house. Sometimes, as a pastor, I spend my days talking to people all day. And if I can be completely honest with you, that drains the life out of me, right? By the time I get home, I've told my wife this. I have X number of words in a day, right? That's it. Sundays, when I'm done preaching after I've been up here yelling at you guys for a long time, right? By the way, it is so nice to yell at you instead of empty chairs. I love this so much. But after I'm done talking, I go home and I'm done. I'm done. I got no more words. I think this is usually a man thing. Men, are you with me? There's a fixed number of words, and when the number of words are up, there's no more words, right? And so on days when I have meetings on meetings on meetings on meetings, I go home and my family wants me to be dad and husband. And the kids will come running out, Dad, let's play Sleeping Queens. By the way, great game for younger kids if you're looking for a good game recommendation. Sleeping Queens, lots of fun. It's good for all ages. Anyways, but they want to come up, they want to play Sleeping Queens, so they want to play Operation, or they want to do this, or they want to go outside and run with the dogs and all this. By the way, we still have a second dog. If anybody of you are interested, let me know. But anyways, with all these things that are happening, like they want me and they want me to be invested in them, but I'm spent and I don't have it. My wife, when we finally put the kids to bed, mercifully, when they actually stay in bed, like, because those are two different things. We put them to bed, and then there's the last moment where they finally stay in bed. Those are not the same thing. But finally, when we get there, my wife and I have an opportunity to sit on the couch and be with one another. And there's times, if I can be completely honest, and listen, I'm transparent up here. There's times where my wife will start talking to me on a day where I've been talking to people all day, and she'll be telling me a story about something with her job, and we will be 3/4 of the way through the story, and I will realize I don't know what she's talking about at all. Right? My brain has checked out and is somewhere else. And I've gotten to the point now when that happens, I'll say to her, baby, I'm really sorry. I've not been listening to you this whole time. I'm so sorry. But she will say things like this. Hey, when you come home, we need your mind too. Right? We need some of your best time too. The reality is it's not okay for me in a relationship with my wife to not be willing to give her everything, right? And now she has to understand too that I've only got so much to give, but the reality is when I'm not present, she can call me out on that and say, hey, you're a part of this family. We need you to actually be here. And that's a fair criticism. It's a fair complaint. When it comes to our relationship with God, you have to be loving him with your whole mind, with your whole heart, with your whole soul, with everything that you have. Giving him less than that is not fair in a relationship. I think sometimes we forget about the fact that our connection with God is a relationship. So this is an important thing. You have to love God with everything you have. But Jesus, not one for just giving the bare minimum, because what was he asked? What is the greatest commandment? What's the most important commandment? And he says what? Love God. Everyone go like this. Love God. Love God. Boom. That's a good one. Love God. But then he goes on and says, hey, by the way, I'm going to give you a bonus one that you didn't ask for. Verse 39. It says, the second one is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all of the law and prophets. You should love your neighbor as yourself. Another way to say that might be love others, right? So everybody love God, love others. Does this feel weird? I don't care. Everyone love God, love others. Love God, love others. That's what he says are the two most important commandments. The things that if you want to know, how is it that you could grow closer in your walk to God? How is it that you could be more like the person that he has called you to be? If you want to know what thing it is you could do today. That's the thing people say to me, like, I just don't know what God's calling me to. I just don't know. I don't know where I'm supposed to be or what I'm supposed to be doing. And you know what my answer is? In the meantime, love God and love others. In the meantime, spend time in his word. In the meantime, figure out how you can serve other people. How many of you don't like all of the other people that exist? Anyone? Just me? I hear some laughter, so I assume there's one very confident hand in the back. Oh, I have a list of people in this room right now who I could tell you, no, I don't always like, can we be real? I don't always like all of the people that God made. Sometimes I look at it and I think, God, what were you doing on that one? I don't understand. Their brain doesn't work right. Something's wrong. Like every idea they have is dumb. I give them things that they could do to straighten their life out and they don't listen to me. Like if they would do what I told them to, everything would be fine, but they don't because they're just awful. God, why? Why does that person exist? I wonder, probably not, but I wonder if anybody has ever thought that about me. I mean, probably not, because I'm delightful, right? But I just wonder if it's even possible that maybe somebody is like, God, what's wrong with that guy? That guy who talks too much and way too loud, and he yells at us at church all the time. What's wrong with him, right? That guy who literally just confessed to the entire church that sometimes he's not a good husband or father. What's wrong with that guy, right? The reality is, I'm going to try to strip away the mystery from this for you. We're all terrible, right? All of us. If you're like, no, not me, especially you, right? All of us have our areas that rub people the wrong way. All of us have our issues that drive other people crazy. And here, Jesus says, the first and most important commandment is love God with everything you have. And everybody's like, yeah, good call. That's a good one. And love everyone else. And everyone's like, I don't know. Have you seen everyone else, God? They're terrible. Have you seen them? The reality is there's no clause for an escape on this. You want to know? You want to know what's the most important thing? Love God. You want to know the second most important thing? Love others. How important are these things? Because this is the key verse to me, verse 40. On these two commandments depend all of the law and prophets. Our last point, why LGLO, is this. If you don't LGLO well, you can't do anything else well either. If you don't LGLO well, if you don't love God and love others well, you can't do anything else in your Christian walk well either. You will not grow. You'll look at other people and you're like, boy, I wish I could be like them. And then you go off and you continue hating people made in the image of God, and you can't figure out what the disconnect is. The reality is, he says it as clear as a bell here. Listen, on these two commandments depend all of the law and prophets. What he's saying is the entirety of the Bible hinges on two simple things. Everybody, love God, love others. I'm going to do this until you do it with me. Love God, love others. I saw three who didn't do it. Love God, love others. It's the right angle of Christianity. This is an illustration that I told you the first week I ever introduced this, and this is how I'll close today. When I was, 18 years old, the summer of 2001, it was a simpler time, right? 2001, I graduated in May of 2001, and then I got a job that summer working at my church where I grew up at as a maintenance man. I was using tools for a living. Can you imagine? No, exactly right. Says the guy who has to come and help me every time something's broken at my house. Yeah. No, legitimate. I was using tools, and there was a couple of big projects the church wanted to do. And one of the big ones was we had a room called the Fellowship Hall. It was a big open room. And they wanted to take it and put permanent walls in, making one big room, essentially a still kind of big room, and then 5 other smaller rooms. And so we had to put in all of the studs and run all of the electrical and literally just start to put these walls up. And I'd never done anything like this. And so as we started doing it, I felt like I was getting more and more competent with it. I was getting good at the 16-inch centers on studs, and I was getting good at framing out doors, and I was getting really pretty good at this. It wasn't wood studs, it was metal studs. And so I was learning how to use the metal studs, and that was a process in and of itself. And then finally my boss had to leave for an afternoon, and he said, hey, I want you to work. We had one last wall that we had to put up on the studs on it. And he said, I want you to work on putting that wall up. And in my head, when he said that, I was feeling confident, I was feeling good, and I said this, I want this entire wall to be studded out and up before he gets back, right? And so when he left, I went to work. So he had already put in, there's a little floor plate that goes. It's kind of like a little tray where you slide the studs in it, and then you have to put one in the ceiling as well, and then that's what you put these metal studs into. So anyways, he had already put the floor one in. I put the header in, and then I started putting in these studs, and I was measuring. I was meticulous. Every one of them was exactly where it's supposed to be. We had a magnetic level. I'd level every single one, attach. I'd level it again at the top, attach, and then I'd level it again, and then I'd measure it again. I was being as absolutely meticulous as I could, and nobody else was ever going to see these studs, but I wanted this wall to be perfect. I get all the way done down to the end, to the last stud, and out the window I can see my boss's truck pulling into the parking lot, and so I attach that last stud before he gets in there. And I am this way. I feel like this, again, might be a bit of a man thing. Maybe ladies too. I don't know. I've never been a lady, but here's what I know. I just got a funny look over there. It's true. All a guy. Anyways, I got done with the last stud and I stepped back and I looked at the entirety of the wall. I do this if ever I mow the grass, which is very seldom. I do this when I mow the grass too, right? I get done mowing the grass and then I step back and I look at it and I do the guy thing. We're like, yeah, I did this. I did this thing. When I paint a room, I get done painting the room, I just look at it, some fine paint on the wall. You know what I mean? I put carpet in my boys' room not too long ago, and I still stand in the doorway, just look at it. Still down there, looks good, right? There's something about finishing a job and looking at the job and feeling like I accomplished a job that just makes my heart sing. And so I step back and I look at this wall, all studded out by this stud. Anyways, it's all studded out, and I look at it and I'm like, yes, I've accomplished this. I finally understood what it was like when God was creating everything, right? And he would get done with each thing and he'd be like, this is good, right? Because I step back and I'm like, this wall is good. My boss walks in and he looks at it and we're standing and we're looking at it front on and seeing all the studs. He's like, all right. I'm like, I know, right? All right, yeah. And a couple of dudes just looking at a wall feeling good about themselves. Then my boss walked this way. And he looked down the wall from the long way. And then he walks back over to me and says, man, I can tell you worked really hard on this wall. I was like, yes, I did. He's like, it's too bad we're going to have to take the whole thing down. It's like, what? Well, we are not taking the wall down. He's like, come with me. He walks me over. So what looked so good and so right and so straight and so perfect and measured out to the eighth of an inch on every side. It was so good. Here was the problem. He had put the footer down and it was a perfect 90 degrees from the wall. When I put the header in, it went like this. And so every stud, while it was exactly spaced correctly, was leaning like this. And when you looked at it from the long way, it's like, how did I not know? But when you step back and look at it from the front, it's a good wall. It's a good wall. But then I got over there and I realized that I was off on one of my angles, right? And it made the whole wall wonky. Now, what happens if you have a wall like this? And man, my wife's great-grand, who just passed away, was a great artist, and she used to paint pictures of the boys and all this kind of stuff. We have some prized pictures that we love that she put up there, and they're framed and whatnot. What happens if we go to hang the picture on this wall? It's going to come crashing down. Over here, it'll be probably fine, right? You won't be able to see it because of the glare, because it's facing the light or whatever. But legitimately, you can't hang anything on that wall. When I experienced that, I actually read these verses that summer at a camp that I went to, and it hit me totally differently. The reality is when Jesus says, the greatest commandments are love God and love others, what he's saying is that the perfect right angle of Christianity is love God, love others. And if either one of them is wonky, your entire Christian walk is wonky. If any one of those things is not right, then nothing else you do is going to feel right. There's people who've been in church their whole lives and they come to me and say, Dave, I don't know. I don't feel like I hear God, or I don't know what God is trying to tell me. And I'll ask are you in the Word regularly? Well, no, but I pray a lot. Okay, tell me about your prayer. Well, I'll usually just say God, what do you want me to do? And then I start doing other things. I'm like, oh, that's not a relationship you're in with God. That's a casual acquaintance that you pass by in the grocery store and nod at and try not to have a real conversation with. You know what I'm talking about? Your love God is off. Excuse me, I have some people who are just, can we be real? Some of the nastiest people I've ever met in my life to other people. Gossipy, mean-spirited, hateful, spiteful. And I'll talk to them like, Dave, I don't know. I just don't feel like I'm connecting with God. It's like, oh, is it possible that it's because you hate all of the people made in his image? Right? The reality is, and this is the thing, I always talk about the Bible. I love having the kids in here. And here's the thing. The Bible is complex, right? The Bible is difficult at times to understand. Sometimes you have to wrestle through difficult topics in the Bible. And yet, the way that we have been called to live is so abundantly obvious and clear that a 6-year-old can understand it, right? Love God. Love others. As we walk through this series, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what we're going to be seeing within Love God and Love Others. The next 4 weeks, we're going to explain how to do that better. When we talk about love God, there are 2 steps that we want you to do as church leaders that we think will help you infinitely. Number 1 is learn. Everyone say learn. You have to learn who God is. You have to study God's word. You have to be spending time with him, studying what he loves and what he hates and trying to mirror your life to that. You have to learn who God is and what he's about and why he calls you. And the next thing within Love God is respond. Everyone say respond. Now, a lot of you have done this once upon a time. You walked an aisle somewhere and then you prayed your magic prayer and you thought that was all you'd ever have to do of response to God. And that's not the case. The Christian walk is a never-ending cycle of learning more about who he is and then responding to what he has shown you. Learn and respond is how we're going to talk about loving God. So for the next 2 weeks, let me tell you what the messages are going to be. Next week, we're going to learn how to learn. And the week after that, we're going to get a chance to respond. Learn and respond. Repeat. Over and over. That's how you love God. When it comes to loving others, these are the ones that a lot of you are going to really not like. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and make it a point to be at the service anyways. The first one is connect. Everyone say connect. Introverts. No, you don't have to repeat that. Sorry. Introvert. That just turned him into a lifelong introvert. I'm never talking again. No, introverts, listen to me. Connecting is not an option. Connecting with the body, connecting with other people who can hold you accountable, connecting with people who can make you sharper in your faith, connecting with the church is an important part of loving others. Connecting with people in your neighborhood is an important part of loving others. So in 3 weeks from today, we're going to talk about connecting and how we can provide opportunities here in the church to connect with others. And the last one, for some of you, this is like a home run, easy one. And for some of you, this is going to be your least favorite of all. It's learn and respond for loving God. For loving others is connect and serve. You have to serve. You have to use the gifts that God has given you to serve others. You have to use the gifts that God has given you to actually put your own wants aside and instead focus on the needs and the desires of other people. We believe at Aviator that if you follow those 4 steps, that you will get really good at loving God and loving others. And in 10 years, you'll look back and you'll say, wow, I have grown so much in my faith. This is what God has done in me during these 10 years. And it's not because you're awesome or a superhero. It's because instead of focusing on yourself, you focused on the things that God has called you to, which is first off, loving God. Secondly, loving others. I think there's probably some people in the room today, if you were being honest, your right angle is a little bit wonky. You're missing the mark somewhere on loving God and loving others. My prayer for this, in addition to showing you what we value as a church and what we think is important, my prayer for this series is that during this series, maybe you could do a little bit of an assessment and you can figure out where your angle is off and straighten that wall up, because everything else hinges on these 2 commands: love God, love others. I love you guys. Can I tell you what made my heart happy recently? I always wonder if you're listening to me or not, right? Because sometimes I can tell you're not. And sometimes I think people zone in and out because like for a while you seem connected and then the rest of the time you're just looking around. I don't know. I used to look at the ceilings and figure out if I could monkey bar across. Does anyone else do that, or is that just me? Just me, good. So anyways, I know that you're not always with me, but I got a reminder that you guys are listening. A few weeks ago, I told you guys that I needed something. I don't know if you remember this or not. I told you that I needed a plane, right? I needed you guys to start giving more to the church so that I could buy a luxury jet. Do you guys remember this? And it was an important plea that I gave you guys, and it was from the bottom of my heart, and I really want you guys to know that I want you to buy me a plane, right? Now, some people are laughing because you remember that I was joking about that. If you're new, just be clear, I was 100% joking about that. But I came into the office last week before I could actually be on the stage, and somebody bought me a plane. So thank you, Tony, for that. It's not exactly what I have in mind, but it's a start. So thank you. But I will say, my hope is that as we walk through this series, you are listening, you are hearing, not from me, but from the God of the universe who wants to straighten you out so that you are a Christian on which things can hang. Or you're a Christian on which people can depend on and people can rely on you to be what God has called you to be. I love you guys. Let's not do this 5-week series and be done with it and be the same person we were when we started. Let's focus on God, and let's let God straighten us up during the next 5 weeks. Let's pray. God, I love you so much. I praise you for the kids in this room, for the opportunity that we have to have a family service, for these kids to be reminded that this church is their church too. God, I ask from age 5 up to 105 that every single person in this room during the next 5 weeks will be challenged, God, not to pursue our own wants, our own desires, but to first and foremost love you with everything. God, to commit time to you, to focus our hearts and our minds and our souls to you. That God, we might look more like you as we get to know you more. And that God, as a result of that, that because of your love for us, we would be compelled to love others. That God, we would see the people in our community as potential lost souls that need to be saved. That God, we would take our responsibilities seriously as a Christian. That God, we would be so worried about connecting and serving others. That God, people would look at the people at Aviator Church and say, I don't know what they have, but I want some of that too. God, let your spirit indwell us and let our actions draw others to you. God, help us to love you and to love others. It's your name we pray. And everyone said, Amen.